Attention, me hearties! Welcome to the Silence Cove. My name is Idris, and today I'm going to talk to you about rum. Well, actually, what I'm going to try to do is explain a bit what rum actually is, because I notice in my shop that a lot of people who come in the shop they like rum, they like to drink it, and but they don't know really what it is. So I think it's quite important to know what you have in your glass and where it actually comes from. So let's get started. So one of the most important things about rum is actually the fact that it's made out of sugarcane. So more specifically, the sugarcane juice. And for those saying molasses, well, that kind of depends. So you have two different sides. So you have one side where the rum is made from pure sugarcane juice, and the other side that's made from molasses. Most of the rums on the market today are made from molasses. So, what is molasses actually? Well, it's a byproduct of the production of sugar. So, when you take some uh, sugar cane, so this plant has a lot of juice in it. So, if you extract this juice, it contains a lot of sugar. So, these plants do not make starch like other grasses. So, this one makes sugar. And so if you extract the sugarcane juice and you start boiling that, you get some crystallization. So that crystallization is what we know as cane sugar. And so what's left behind is molasses. So you have different varieties of molasses, all depending on how much sugar crystals have been extracted. Um, Everybody probably heard of blackstrap molasses, which is the molasses that's most concentrated. And so there's still sugar left in molasses, so it's some dark gooey stuff. So molasses contains still a lot of sugar. I think about 40% sugar from the original cane juice is still in there. So there's no way to extract more sugar without resorting to some, let's say, uh, chemical things or whatever. It's not done. It's not worth the effort either. This molasses is what's used to make a lot of rum. So that means that in a way rum is kind of a byproduct of sugar production. And so what happens with this molasses is they put it in a vessel, they add water, and they add yeast, or they keep it open air and let yeast go in automatically. So that's wild yeast. So anyway, that starts a fermentation process. Fermentation is the extraction of sugar by the yeast and transforming it into alcohol. So that alcohol is what we actually need to create rum. And the way that's done to create rum from that fermentation is to put it in a still. So I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of distillation in a way because I'm not that familiar with it myself. I've never distilled anything. Should do that, I know, but it's illegal where I live. So, uh, but the fact is that when you distill, you get the fermented molasses or sugarcane juice, depending on again which variety of rum you're trying to create. So if you have that into the distill and you heat it up, you can extract alcohol. You will always extract a bit of water, but depending on how you distill and at what level you get it, at a certain amount, you are left with pure alcohol. Uh, in the case of rum, in any case in the EU, you're not allowed to surpass the 96% alcohol while distilling in order to still call it rum. So that's something that's important. Now, from experience, I can say that if a rum is distilled over 90%, it gets a bit harsh. But in some cases, it's okay because you put it through an aging process, which makes it little bit more accessible or okay for the palate. There's also something that you should know about rum is that contrary to a lot of other spirits, rum still has a lot of taste while on a high ABV. So, for example, a rum of 84, 87%, it still tastes like rum. You do taste that there's a lot of alcohol in it, obviously, but it still tastes like rum. That's really specific for rum. If you take other spirits, you will notice that once you get to close to 80-85%, a lot of the taste kind of disappears. So that allows rum to go through high ABVs and then create something that's more softer by adding water or by aging or whatever. But in some cases, they get distilled and go directly to the bottle. That's something you can see in some of the specifically French style rums, but I guess we'll see that for other rums too in the future. Anyway, so once a rum is distilled, you get the rum, and that's kind of it. So for the EU, that's all you need to call it rum. So you take that, you put it in a bottle, you add some water, or that's okay. The only things that you can add when bottling rum, again for the EU, because that's where I live. So the only things that you can add to a bottle when you put rum in the bottle is obviously rum, water. Doesn't need to be spring water or denatured water. It doesn't. It's your choice, but it needs to be water. And what you can also add is sugar. Now, I know that in a lot of countries there's no specific rule on the amount of sugar. For the EU, this has been changed recently, and so it's limited to 20 grams of sugar per liter of rum, which is still a lot. So if I see bottles that say says 40 grams of sugar per liter, sounds a bit syrupy, but okay, it's a choice, and people like it or they don't, and but you still have the choice. Anyway, for the EU, in order to use the label rum, you cannot surpass 20 grams. Another rule is that you cannot add anything else except some coloring. So coloring is something that is done within the industry, in some cases to change the color entirely. In other cases, it's done to kind of rectify the color. So what's used is caramel, E150. It's something that's used in a lot of circumstances in the food industry. It's used in other spirits too, like whiskey and so on. So it's allowed. It's just caramel. It's not something that you will taste, because just a few drops of caramel can change the whole look of a spirit. So and in the rum industry, you might find circumstances where they add molasses. It doesn't happen a lot because molasses does change the taste a bit. So they try to avoid it, but it exists. They can use molasses, so black molasses, to color your rum. Now, to get back to the color, please mind that rum doesn't necessarily need to be aged on a barrel in order to be rum. There are some countries where that's a rule. For example, in countries like the Dominican Republic, if it's not aged, it's aguardiente, it's not rum. That's specific for that region, and there are good reasons why they insist on aging. In the EU, that's not a rule. So you don't need to age anything in order to call it a rum. So if you have this, for example, this bottle, it's completely white, it is rum. Specifically, this one is rum agricole, but doesn't change a thing. I have some Jamaican rum here too. It's, you can't see it because it's a dark bottle, but it's white rum. So, but do mind the fact that a rum being white is not a sign of it being unaged. Let me explain. Some rums, like the most famous example, Bacardi Carta Blanca. Bacardi Carta Blanca is a white rum because it's transparent, but it's actually aged. And then they filter out the color in order to make it white rum. So, because if it's not aged, it's considered aguardiente, it's not a rum. So that's a bit of a change in how you should look at things. So that's why I personally like to talk about aged and unaged, and then white or dark, because you need to specify. It can be an aged white rum, but it can also be an unaged dark rum, and an unaged dark rum, for example, is one that is plentiful of caramel. There are some notable examples on the market. You will get to know them. But the process of coloring rum is something that has to do mostly with aged rums. So even rum is aged, you could use dark bottles to put them in, well, like for example this one. It's also a Jamaican rum. It's a dark bottle. Using dark bottles has an advantage, meaning that if you have some discrepancies in color over time, the customer won't notice. Um, it's a practice. The practice of using dark bottles is mainly something that you will see in the high-end rums, because it's you can count on the fact that this will be a good rum. Okay, so but if you have some more commercially available rums, like for example Appleton Estate 8, which is a fine rum. Don't get me wrong; it's a fine rum. It's a well, I love Joy Spence, really. So, but this one, you will notice on the label on the bag it says that you can contain coloring. The reason why is because if you this is some mass-produced rum, and if you put these on a shelf and you will have a discrepancy in color between one batch and another batch, people will obviously think that the paler ones have an issue, that there's something wrong with them. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with them, it's just another batch. But in order to avoid these kind of discussions and to avoid some problems when it comes to marketing, they choose to add just a little bit of caramel coloring if necessary in order to rectify the color. Now, it's not because it's on the label that it's actually in there. What this means is that if in some cases they might want to add some coloring, and they will do so, and then it's already on the label. Some brands choose to not put it on the label, but when they add the coloring, they will add a small extra label on the back saying this one contains some coloring. In Europe, you will probably notice that it's mostly written in German, because in Germany they're kind of strict when it comes to those things. And you will see mit Farbstoff, which means with coloring. So if you buy bottles in Europe, you see mit Farbstoff, you will find that it's a bottle that certainly contains coloring. All right, so coloring. So normally coloring, except for some weird exceptions, normally the color of rum is kind of a result of the aging process. Aging is not mandatory in the EU, as I said, but it's something that's kind of preferred by the market. I try to get people to drink white rum too, because I think it contains the basic taste of rum, and it allows you to evaluate the benefits or not from aging. But as I said, there's no rule around aging in the EU. What is a very important rule, that's when you bottle a rum in the EU, it's mandatory to bottle it at least at 37.5% ABV. There are not a lot of rums on the Belgian market with that amount of alcohol in it. Most of them are what we call the supermarket rums that are used to create cocktails or mixers. In most cases, you will find that rum will be at 40% ABV. But the 37.5% ABV kind of shows some important stuff. A lot of the rums that you will find on the market in Belgium, or what is considered rums, are bottled at 35% if they are in the low end price range. So those do not contain the label rum. If it's 35%, it's not rum, so it's not labeled rum. But they do try to get people convinced that it is rum by using the same label as their rum and so on. We know which brands we're talking about. But anyway, it's kind of sketchy, but the real important thing about 37.5% ABV, that is that it must contain alcohol. So if you see anyone saying it's alcohol-free rum, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist, and it's a good thing. alcohol is what makes rum. And it might be unhealthy. It might be not really good to drink alcohol every day. I get it. It's okay. Uh, we know that. But the history of rum is strongly connected with the fact that it's an alcoholic beverage. If it wasn't alcoholic, rum wouldn't have been so popular or so big in the world. And that's nothing to do with the fact that you get drunk of it. It has everything to do with what rum represented through the history. But that's stuff for another video. Anyway, so note that the EU is a bit strict on some specific things of rum. For example, the ABV level, something that other countries might not have. The fact that it's not necessarily aged is something that other countries might not agree upon. But know that it is something that we need to consider. So in the EU, you might have other rums than in other countries. I hope I gave you enough information with that. So, well, we'll see each other in the next video. Like and subscribe. Now back to work, you scallywags.